Hi there, it's Jen from Jen's Homieology, and today we have another fun make from Sewfisticated Craft Designs, the Scholar Pack. This backpack goes above and beyond the Call of Duty for what you would need for your school bag. It features a front pocket that has a key leash and a pen loop along with a slip pocket. And this front pocket does go down even farther, so it's great for books. It has a lower zipper pocket. So if you would like, you can make this all one piece so you wouldn't have this zipper. It has optional swivel hooks that you can attach like the Odyssey pack to, which is a great lunch box. You have your side pockets with elastics, which are great for water bottles. There's an upper grab handle. On the back, you have your straps. Now in the pattern, there's not only regular straps, but there's the extended strap. And then you have the option of doing a regular strap or with a D-ring. There's also a version of being able to do a chest strap. In this tutorial, I will just be walking through the regular straps. There's also a bag hook. There's an optional luggage sleeve, which is great if you would like to attach your bag to a dolly. Also a back zipper pocket. And then there's a back gusset for a laptop compartment. And you got your main compartment that has a sleeve pocket, which is a great separation pocket as it's looser than what a slip pocket would be. And a lot of great room for textbooks. And then on the front panel, well, you can really see this, there's a zipper pocket along with a regular slip pocket. It's so nice and roomy in there, great for all your books. Of course, features the ladder buckles for the adjustable straps. Now this will be the backpack that we will be making during this tutorial today. I used a mixture of cotton woven, which is my print, and bonded twill for the outside, along with a 3D air mesh for the back. My lining fabrics is a hexagon ripstop. And I also have some vibrant view for my pocket linings. Now let's go ahead and walk through our pattern pieces and the supplies that are needed in order to make this backpack. For our supplies and materials needed for our Scholar Pack, you'll need your piece of A, and a piece of AA, which is the bottom half of your front panel. And you'll need both of these pieces if you want it to do the front with the zipper down the center. If you wanted to do a more simplified version, you can cut 2 pieces of A1 versus the 1 piece that's needed. So I only have 1 piece since I'm doing that separated zipper down the middle. And a piece of A2, which is a lightweight stabilizer. Piece of A3, which is a lining fabric. This is the bottom zipper pocket. And your A4 piece, which is the other side of the lining to that pocket. Your ZA zipper with a pull, that will be that zipper tape. An exterior fabric of B which is your upper part of your front gusset. And then a lining piece of B1. And then an exterior piece of BB. A lining piece of BB1. And then your ZB zipper with 1 to 2 pulls. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 pulls for it. A piece of AB, your lining. This will be the back side of that front pocket. And then a piece of AB1, which is a lightweight fabric for the key leash, and this is optional. Piece of AB2 for that slip pocket that's in that front panel, along with a piece of elastic band that can be anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch, and that's for your pen loop. Then a piece of AB3, which is your binding to that slip pocket. 2 pieces of C, which is a lining fabric. 2 pieces of a lightweight stabilizer for C1. Using a lightweight stabilizer for these really allows you to get into the book bag without making it too firm. 2 pieces of C2 for your zipper pocket lining. And 2 pieces of C3 for a slip pocket. And then a piece of C3A, which is the binding to that slip pocket. 2 pieces of C4, and this is that sleeve pocket. A zipper tape of ZC with a pull. 1 piece of D, this is for your back panel. I am using a 3D air mesh, but you can make it out of your exterior fabric. And then 2 pieces of lining fabric of D1. These are for that back panel, which is your laptop compartment. D2, which is a heavy foam stabilizer. This will give your back panel some padding and support. 2 pieces of D3 for your zipper pocket lining on the back panel. Your ZD zipper with a pull for the back panel. A piece of D4, which is your strap backing. You could also use a piece of 1.5 inch webbing. D5, which is your back panel grab handle. This is optional. 2 pieces of D, which is your tab strap connectors. A piece of DD exterior. This is the part of your zipper gusset for the laptop compartment. And a piece of DD1, which is a lining fabric. This is the lining to that zipper gusset for the laptop compartment. And then ZDD, along with 1 to 2 pulls. I'm going to use 2 pulls on mine. This is the zipper to that back panel compartment / laptop compartment. And then 2 pieces of 1 inch webbing. These are what you will use to adjust the tightness of your backpack. So these go through your ladder buckles. You can make this longer than what's suggested in the pattern for a taller or bigger built person. You'll need 2 of those. And then if you are doing a luggage sleeve, you'll need 1.5 inch webbing. 2 pieces of E, and these are your side panel exteriors. 2 pieces of E1 exterior, these are your cup holders. And then 2 pieces of E2, which is the lining to those side pocket cup holders. 2 pieces of E3, which are your elastic band casing tabs, along with 2 pieces of elastic band. A piece of E4, which is optional. This is for the swivel hooks that are on the front of the bag to attach things to, like the Odyssey pack is a great thing to attach to that, which makes a great lunch box. So I'm going to put these on this one. Piece of F, which is your base exterior. Piece of F1, which is a firm heavyweight stabilizer. Piece of F2, which is your lining of your gusset, of your side gussets. This is the interior. Piece of F3, which is another firm stabilizer. This will help give structure to the whole bottom part of your bag, which then makes the bag easier to carry. Piece of G, which is your upper part of your gusset. And then 2 pieces of G1 exterior. These are also part of your upper gusset. So these 3 pieces end up making the backer thick side of your gusset. So it makes this gusset right here. It goes towards the back panel. A piece of G2 for the grab handle. So this can be made out of exterior fabric or lining. A thick foam for your G3 stabilizer. This goes in the middle of your grab handle. G4, 1 piece for your lining. That's the lining to that gusset that we pieced together. So all those G's that we just walked through, this will be the lining to that. And a lightweight stabilizer for G5. Using a lightweight for this will allow getting into your bag easier. A piece of GG, which is an exterior for the front part of your gusset. And GG1 lining, so the lining to that front part of your gusset. And then GG2 stabilizer for it, another lightweight one. And then here's your ZG zipper for that gusset, along with 2 pulls. And then depending on what kind of straps you're doing, you'll either have H or HH. HH is the extended straps, and then H are the regular straps. So I have 2 exterior fabrics and then 2 of the 3D air mesh, and they are mirrored fabric. So I have 2 exterior mirrored and then 2 of the 3D air mesh mirrored. You can just do this exterior fabric for the front and the back sides. And that's the same thing if you were to have HH for the extended. And then you'll need 2 pieces of H1, which is a foam stabilizer. This will help with comfort of wearing your straps. Using 3D air mesh is also will help with the comfort of it and breathability of it, but your really softness comes in through your stabilizer. And again, you want mirrored images of those. And then if you're using the extended strap, you will have your HH1s for your stabilizers. And then you also have different strap options, along with being either extended or regular. If you do the extended one, you have an option of adding a D-ring in. So you can put a D-ring into your tab. You can also do it on the regular, but if you want the regular length with the D-ring, you need to cut the extended length, do the D-ring, and then use your pattern piece to cut it down to the right length. That way you make sure you have enough fabric to do that. There's also an option to do a strap connector across, so you would have long webbing here and then you have strap that goes across. So if you did that strap connector, you would need a release buckle and whatever width of the release buckle that you do, make sure that your webbing matches. And then there will be length of webbing that you would use to attach here and across. I'm not going to do this just because I spent the time fussy cutting my straps and I don't want to cover up a good portion of the print. When you're doing the regular version of the straps, you'll need 2 pieces of smaller cut webbing per the cut list. Those will be this connector right here, and then 2 ladder buckles, optional of 5 purse feet. And then if you're doing the key leash, you will need 1 3/4 inch swivel hook. If you are doing the swivel hooks on the outside for a connector, you would need additional 2 swivel hooks of 3/4 of an inch. So those swivel hooks are these, which are great for connecting the Odyssey pack to the outside, and then the other swivel hook is on our key leash, which is inside that front panel. There's also an option to use rivets on the sides of the slip pockets, along with the backpack strapping, backing, and on our grab handle. And because this pattern is finished using the binding method, you will need binding to finish your bag. And now that we've walked through all of our supplies and materials needed, we can get sewing. We're going to start off our scholar pack with the interior panel and the slip pocket. So you'll need both of your pieces of C3. And you'll place those right sides together. And you're going to join the 2 sides and the bottom. And then you can sew with a 1/4 seam allowance. And you can snip your seam allowance corners. And turn your fabric right side out and flatten your seams. And you want to poke out those corners. And then take your binding tape piece of C3A and encase your top edge. And then we can top stitch the tape in place using a 1/4 seam allowance. There's our slip pocket. We can go ahead and set this aside for now. Now we're going to be working on the interior zipper that's on the middle panel, like the center panel. So you'll need your pieces of C2. And you can transfer the zipper box markings from the pattern piece to the wrong side of the pocket, or you can manually draw on your zipper box. And then there's our markings for our zipper box on the wrong side of one of our pieces of C2. Now you want to take one of your pieces of C and have that right side up, making sure that the top of it, so the smaller curved part, is towards the top. That way you don't accidentally put your zipper box on the wrong edge. And place one of my C's off to the side. And place our zipper box wrong side up so that the fabrics are right sides together. Center of my pocket lining, and then the center of this top edge. Actually, I can just find the center of the whole panel, and then measure 2 inches down and make that marking there, so that way I know where the center of my panel is, so I can match up the center of my zipper pocket. And then my zipper pocket will be centered on my panel. And then I want that 2 inches down from the top across the panel. Use masking tape to hold your lining in place. Now we can stitch along those 2 lines that we have, and you want to make sure that you back tack at the start and the ending of the lines. And then you remove your masking tape. And now we can cut our V-cornered box. Make a slit right down the middle for our zipper. Once you get to the end, you'll make that V. Make sure that you don't snip into any of your stitches. You want to get as close as you can to them. And before I turn this out, I'm actually going to stitch these zipper box flaps to my zipper linings. I'm going ahead by doing that by pushing the fabric down at the seam and then I'm going to sew along that flap. So I'm going to keep this down. You can use masking tape to keep it in place if you would like. And I'm going to turn over with that piece still down and just stitch along this little flap. And you can do it with a 1/8 seam allowance away from your previous stitching. There's that one. And now I'm going to repeat with my other part of my zipper pocket lining. So the bottom piece, I'm going to put that up. I'm keeping that up. I'm going to flip over. I just flip over because it's easier to see where my zipper actually ends. And I'm also going to stitch that side. And then within doing that, when you flip back to the right side of your panel, you go to push through your zipper lining through your box. It will then hold those flaps to your box open, and I think it just makes a nice, cleaner box. And there's just less layers to have to worry about. Okay. And then depending on your fabrics, you can give your zipper box a press. Markings. So now that will be ready for our zipper. And so you'll take your ZC zipper with your pull. You'll need double-sided tape for this step. We'll singe the ends of our zipper tape to prevent any fraying. And place your zipper pull on. And then place double-sided tape on both long edges of your zipper tape. And then make sure that your zipper pull is facing the way that you want it to. It won't matter too much in a backpack, since it will kind of depend on which way you're looking into your bag, at least in my opinion, from what I noticed with my kids. You can either remove one double-sided tape edge and do them one by one, or you can do it together. You'll just center the tape in the box between the teeth. And then we can sew around our box with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now I did not back tack at the beginning of my zipper box, and I did that so I can pull through the thread. Now I'm going to stop exactly where I started. and leave a little bit of a tail so you can pull through and tie off. And you can see that the stitches that we use to hold those flaps down are actually hidden behind the zipper tape. Then you can trim your excess zipper tape. And because I did that, I'm just going to quickly singe those ends again. Take your other piece of C2 lining and place that right sides down so that your lining, pocket linings are right sides together. And you'll match that all the way around. Matching up all around the pocket. So we're going to sew these two pocket pieces linings together with a 3/8 seam allowance. And you'll just ensure that you keep your main panel lining out of the way. Now we can sew around with a 3/8 seam allowance. Now your zipper pocket is completed. Now for the next step, you're going to want your zipper pocket lining to be up out of the way. So I like to grab this now and clip it to the top of my panel. So that way you don't accidentally sew through your pocket lining. Because we are now going to attach our slip pocket. I'm going to find the center of the bottom and the top of my slip pocket. And then the center of my panel from the bottom. Now I'm going to mark 2 inches up from the bottom, or you can take the measurements from the pattern piece. I'm going to mark this 2-inch center up, and then if I keep my panel in half, I can take the height of my slip pocket by brushing it there, and then I can mark the center of where my top of my slip pocket will go. So that way I know that that line is a center marking, and then my top and my bottom center markings, I can match those up, and that will help keep my pocket straight. And then what I can do is I can stick masking tape to help hold this pocket in place while it's being sewn. You can ensure that your pocket is the same height across your bottom before you sew down. Now we're going to sew around with a 1/8 seam allowance along the 2 sides and the bottom to attach our slip pocket. Again, ensure that your zipper lining, pocket lining is up out of the way. You can either place rivets on the two ends for extra security, or you can also draw triangle stitches at the corners. And you can remove clips that you've had or whatever you had holding up your zipper pocket lining, and remove any masking tape and or markings that you've made. And put that down, and then this panel is ready for the assembly, and we're going to set this one aside for now. Now moving on to our sleeve pocket, you'll need your both pieces of C4. And you'll place those right sides together, and we're going to sew together our top and bottom edge. Sew these together with a 1/4 seam allowance. Repeat on the bottom edge. And then snip your seam allowance corners. Now we can turn this right side out. And you can give this a press if you're able to. You at least want to flatten your seams so that you can then top stitch along them. Now we can top stitch our top and bottom seams with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then there's that. So now we'll attach it to our other piece of C4. You place your C4 lining right side up, again making sure that your smaller curve is towards the top. Let's see how this is the smaller. That part goes towards the top. And we're going to measure 2 inches up again from our bottom. You can also take your placement markings from your pattern piece. And we'll place this along that marking. Okay. Now this pocket does have some space. Like, it's not a flat pocket. It's going to have some separation in there. So when it's in your book bag, it has somewhat of like a divider with being able to have space in between the sections. So it's great for like textbooks and stuff when you're trying to keep things separated and organized in your bag. I'm going to baste on the one side first, and then I'm going to stitch on my other side. That helps with keeping your clips in place. Now you repeat on the other side. This way you don't have to worry about those clips coming undone, and you can move that panel and shift it over. Now you can baste this side on. That. Now you will take this piece, a piece of C1 stabilizer, which is a light foam, along with a piece of D1. Now this D1 is your laptop compartment, so that back compartment panel piece. I'm gonna place this, I'm gonna stick it right side down, followed by my piece of stabilizer, and then I'm gonna sandwich that with my piece of C right side up. So that way, once this is all basted together, you'll have this right side facing out and this right side facing out. Just gonna quickly clip around to keep these from shifting as I baste them together. I'm going to baste this all together with a 1/8 seam allowance. And there's that completed. Now, if you wanted to do a more simplified version of the backpack without the laptop compartment, and you still wanted to do this sleeve pocket, then you would attach your back panel with it. That would have your backpack straps, and that would end up being this piece. Then you wouldn't have another compartment behind it. And there's this, and this can be set off until your final assembly. Now moving on to our front panel zipper pocket. Step 7 will walk you through attaching a logo tag if you have one, and you'll attach that to either your piece of AA if you are doing the regular version, or you can attach it to your piece of A1 exterior if you're doing the simplified version. If you are doing the simplified front panel, then you will want to skip to step 11. We're going to continue on with the regular version. Now you'll take your ZA zipper with your pull and we'll cinch the edges of our zipper tape. And then if you're one to leave off your tools when finishing a project, go ahead and attach your pool nail. I'm going to wait, but I'm just going to place my pool on my machine bed, so I got to keep moving it to give me that hint that I need to put it on when I'm ready. I'm going to grab my ZA lining, and with that right sides up, place my zipper along the top straight edge. And I'm going to base this in place with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then you'll take your piece of AA, and with that right side down, matching your fabric along your zipper edge. And also with a 1/4 seam allowance. And you can trim the edges of your exterior fabric to reduce bulk, making sure to not clip into your zipper tape. And then you can turn it right side out and flatten the seam. And then we'll top stitch with a 1/8 seam allowance along the zipper. And then you grab your piece of A4 lining, and with this right side up, place the zipper raw edge also right side up, and you'll line up the edge of your fabric so that your pocket lining aligns. And then base this on with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now we'll attach our piece of A. And take the bottom edge of A, which is the straight edge, and lay that right sides down along our zipper tape. Again, aligning up our fabric so that they align and match. And this time we're going to sew with a 1/4 seam allowance. You can fold this up and top stitch. Now keep in mind that there's no lining right now across this top edge when we're going to top stitch. We'll have 3 layers at the bottom and 1 layer at top. Top stitch along that with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now, if you haven't placed on your pool, go ahead and do so now. On that side, you'll now need your piece of A1 lining. your piece of A2, and this is where if you were doing the simplified front, you would pick up at. So if you were doing the simplified front, you would have two pieces of A1 and then your A2 stabilizer, to where we have our made front and the A2 stabilizer and then the A1. So as our previous panel that we assembled, we're going to place our lining first, right side down. Place in our stabilizer. And then our other panel, right side up. So that when these are sandwiched and sewn all together, both of your right sides are facing out. I'm gonna clip around the perimeter just to stop things from sliding real quickly. Now the base around the perimeter with a 1/8 seam allowance, ensuring that your pull is attached. And then there's that. That made our bottom zipper pocket. And you can trim away any excess zipper tape. And because I snipped off some zipper tape, I'm going to singe those edges slightly. And you can place this off to the side for now. Now for the front panel gusset, I'll need our piece of B, our ZB zipper with 1 to 2 pulls. I'm going to be using 2. I'm going to singe our zipper ends. And then slide on your pulls. And then we'll find the center of our zipper tape. I'm going to mark both sides so I have it. You'll take your piece of B1 lining and have that right side up. Take your zipper tape that we attached our pulls to, with that center point matching both right sides up. So your zipper will be right side up along with your lining. And match the center point of the inner arch. And then you can unzip your zipper tape. And then you can work out and clip around your zipper tape, ensuring that you're taking your B1 lining right side up and your ZB zipper right side up. is our zipper with our B1 lining, and we need to base this on with a 1/8 seam allowance for easier handling around the curves. Sew with the lining facing up. You want to make sure to smooth and straighten around the curves to avoid puckers. So basting with a 1/8 seam allowance. And you can check to see that curve. Now you take your piece B and find your center. And find your center of your top too, since you'll need that for later. And then we're going to match that center inner curve, right sides down, so right sides together with our zipper tape along that center point. And match out. Okay. Match the ends up of where your lining stopped. Now you can clip out around for your exterior. And now you can sew with a 1/4 seam allowance. I'll check your stitches, especially around that curve, to make sure that you don't have any puckers. Once you are happy with your curves, the reason why we did our lining first is so you can go in and cut just your exterior using pinking shears, or you can make snippets around the curve. This will help your fabric lay smoother. until you've trimmed that seam allowance around the curves. You can turn out your fabric. I'm going to clip around to ensure that I'm matching my fabric evenly. Now we can go around and top stitch on our zipper and then baste around our perimeter. And join that with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then here is our upper part of our zipper, back side. Now remember, the zipper does come out a little bit, so trying to lay this flat will make your thing crinkle. So you want to see how your panel looks with that zipper up. Now take your BB1 lining, look over the gusset that we just made, and match your lining right sides together along that bottom edge. You'll have a little bit of extra zipper tape hanging out, and you do not want to trim that. And then baste with a 1/8. Flip over to the other side and take your piece of BB and match that right sides together with the exterior fabric along that straight edge. Now you can sew these with a 1/4 seam allowance. And then you'll trim your seam allowance corners. You can trim all of your corners on the exterior arch, but on the interior arch, you only want to clip your exterior fabric. And then you can turn the fabric right side out. And put together just to help keep my layers in place. Now you can baste around the perimeter of the exterior arch and the interior arch, and then we're going to top stitch along our 2 joined seams. We'll do that with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then we can set this aside. Now moving on to the key leash, you'll need your piece of AB1. And on the wrong side of AB1, you're going to draw 3 lines, 1 on your short edge and then 2 along the long edge, each 3/4 of an inch away from the edges. And place double-sided tape along those edges. So you will remove the backing to the double-sided tape that's on the short edge first and match up to your line. And then remove the other 2 pieces of double-sided tape and matching those up to the line. And then I like to slightly poke in this corner just so it stays out. And repeat on the other. One other piece of double-sided tape along one of the long edges. Now you can fold in half and conceal all of your raw edges. And there's that. Now you can stick the end that we folded back. Actually, no, I'm going to slip this on to the other end. So then I could just fold this piece. But the piece that's, that we did fold down, we're going to fold it back an inch. And now I can top stitch along both long edges and then the folded short edge. Doing that with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then there's that. You can also secure with a rivet at the end. We can now set this aside. For your slip pocket, you'll need your piece of AB2 along with your elastic band for your pen loop. You're gonna fold this elastic band in half to create a loop. And we're going to position that 1 3/8 away from the edge. If you have a tag that you would like to add, you can place it on the opposite side from the pen loop, but at the same height for symmetry. Now we're going to base this in place with a 1/8. And then next you're going to fold the long edges so then that the fabric is right sides together. And you'll stitch along the two sides. And so with a 1/4 seam allowance. And then you can trim your seam allowance corners and turn out your fabric. You can give that a press to lay flat. I'll take your binding piece of AB3 and cover your raw edge. And then sew on with a 1/4 seam allowance. Now take your main lining piece of AB and lift this right side up, marking your top center of your panel of AB, along with marking down from that center 8 5/8. I like to keep my panel folded in half all the way along and mark that 8 5/8 marking from the center. Then taking my pocket and measuring, because we're going to measure, we're going to have that seam of this pocket against that 1/8 and 5/8 marking, and finding the center top of my panel and also marking that. That will allow me to easily center my pocket and keep it so it's straight and not crooked. I'm going to quickly fold my pocket in half and find the top center of the pocket and also the bottom center of my pocket. Make sure the front of the pocket is right side up. Mark that center. And apply masking tape to keep it in place. And then match the center of the top of the panel and use masking tape to keep that in place. Now you can measure across to make sure that your pocket is evenly spaced if you would like. And we're gonna stitch around the sides and along the bottom with a 1/8 seam allowance. Again, if you would like, you can reinforce the sides with either the triangle stitch or with rivets. Remove your masking tape. Now you can take your key leash and attach it on the opposite side from your pen loop, so along that edge, and then baste in place. Now your front panel lining with slip pocket is ready for the front panel assembly. And for the front panel assembly, you'll need this lining, our front zipper gusset that we made, our front exterior panel, C1 with slip pocket and zipper pocket, a piece of stabilizer of C1. First take our exterior panel and our zipper gusset. Now align your front exterior panel right sides together with the gusset. And stick that down, and then this. It does help to find your centers of this panel. Your centers of that panel, and then find the centers of your inner gusset arches. Now I like to take this panel of the exterior right side up. I'm also gonna lay this right side up on top of it, so then I can match take my bottom first and flip that so that the right sides together, matching that center point first. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with my zipper. I'm gonna unzip it, make this easier. So take that and match that right sides together, so they'll be like this, and then you're gonna fold that back and down, matching that center point, and clip that. Now you'll go in and around and clip around to match all your edges. Sure that your side join gussets are stopping and starting around the same spot for symmetry. And now we can base this on with a 1/8 seam allowance. If you would like, you can go ahead and sew your straight edges and then come back around for your curves. It is also helpful to have a pair of hemostats. Make sure that when you get to the curves that you're making sure that the fabric is laying straight and not bunching. And there's that. You can go ahead and check your basting and make sure that there's no puckers. Once you've checked all of your seams, make sure that there's no gathers of the corners. And around your zipper tape, we are going to attach our binding to our backside. Now your front panel is ready for your binding. If you are using binding that is wider than 7/8 of an inch, make sure that you line up your binding to go more towards your lining than your zipper. That way it will make your zipper opening easier. I am using 3/4 inch of binding for this one, especially because I have thinner seams. Now I'm going to start at the bottom of my panel and work my way around. You can either clip your binding on, or you can do it as you sew. Another thing with the binding is when you're stitching this, because we're going to stitch around with a 1/4 seam allowance, when you're stitching, when you go around the corners, if you shorten your stitch length, that will help reduce the amount of puckers at the corner. Started that off a little bit, and I'm going to do the rest by hand versus clipping it. Again, you're going to sew with a 1/4 seam allowance. Okay, now we're about to go into the curves. I'm going to shorten my stitch length. So just work out your fabrics. And then we're coming around another curve, so make sure you shorten your stitch length again. Once you're out of the curve, you can lengthen your stitch again. Okay, and then again around a corner, so let's shorten our stitch length. And then we're out of that curve, so we can lengthen our stitch. And then again, for our last curve, shorten your stitch length. And we'll leave a little extra past our binding so we can fold it back and hide our raw edge. Then you want to check your fabric and make sure that there's no puckers around your curve, and you can give your bag a test zip up. We just bound this part. Check to make sure that you caught all of your binding. Here is our finished front panel, so your binding tape all the way around that, and then you check to make sure you don't have any puckers in your fabric. It's just kind of hard to see, and the camera makes it look like there's tons of them, but if you look, like, that curve is perfect. There's nothing, there's no gathering of the fabric. And then you also want to check the flap, because that's the curve that we just sewn. And you can give it a test zip up and ensure that you are happy with it. Now this will lay a whole lot better once it's actually attached to the rest of the pieces, which is what we're going to start to do now. So you're going to align your AB lining, and the one with your slip pocket and pen loop and your key loop, and have that right side up, and place your panel also right side up. And then we'll quickly clip a few around. This will really help to ensure that your panel is straight and it doesn't have any weird like wrinkles in it. On the way you're matching it to this lining. And now you have this all flipped around and your panel is pulled out to the edges. So you'll have your right side, and when you flip it over, you'll see the wrong side. So when you open up your pocket, you then see your pocket and key leash. Now we're going to baste around this with a 1/8 seam allowance. Make sure that you caught everything. Now we're going to do another round of basting stitches. We're going to flip this over to the wrong side and take our C1 stabilizer and our zipper panel and have that right side facing up. So when you see the right side of your panel, when you flip over, you'll see the exterior, and sandwiched between will be that stabilizer. Again, I'm gonna flip around. And this one, since the exterior is already attached to one of these linings, I won't need to go as strong with the clips. Okay, and then we can base these with a 1/8 seam allowance. Once these are in the backpack, it won't look as weird. Okay. So there's that one. There's the other side. So your slip pocket, your zipper pocket. On the front side, you got your bottom zipper pocket. And then round it, flip, flap. And then you round it, flap pocket with the slip pocket, key leash, and your pen loop. And now we can set this aside for our final assembly. We're about to move on to our side panel assembly. So if you would like to take a break now and stretch, get something to eat, right now would be a good time to do so. Starting off our side panel assembly will be with our swivel hook tabs. If you are not doing the swivel hooks on the outside of the bag, you will skip over this portion. You will take your piece of E4 and down the middle, draw a line. And then fold your two long edges to meet that middle line. Now I am based around this with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then I can fold this in half and cut it into 2 even pieces. Take your swivel hooks and slide them on, and then you'll conceal the raw edges. And you fold over. You'll do that for both of your pieces. And then you can baste these shut with a 1/8. And then we can set these aside for our later use. Next, we'll take our piece of F, which is our base, and then our piece of F1 stabilizer, which is a heavyweight stabilizer. We need to find the center of our stabilizer so that we can center it within our panel of our base. And then repeat for your base. Have that wrong side facing up, and then take your stabilizer and center that, which if you match up all of your center points, it will be within the center perfectly around. Because if you shifted this way, then that center point would be off. So as long as all your center points match up, your stabilizer is perfectly centered within the panel. You can take some masking tape to hold your stabilizer in place. Now we're going to secure the stabilizer in place by stitching around with a 1/4 seam allowance. Now what I did is I hurried it up and marked the 1/4 of an inch away from each side, so that way I know that I need to stop my needle right here and then sew along. So I'm going to start there. Now I pulled those through and tied those off. So you'll have that. Now you can sew a second row of stitching around 1/8 of an inch away from the previous stitches. Okay, the next part is for your purse feet installation. So if you are skipping the purse feet, then you can skip step 25. Now if you are doing the purse feet, you can either take placement markings from piece F/F1 for guidance, or you can manually measure. Flip this over to the wrong side because that's where I want to make my markings. I'm going to clip my pattern piece to it so it doesn't shift. I made little holes in my pattern piece so I can stick my pen in and make my dots. So there's that. And now I'm going to punch out my holes real quick. Alright, so I didn't do my hole punches on the camera just because then I need my mat so I don't damage my table, but I just use a little Japanese punch and poke on down. And I use a size that's slightly smaller than my screws. And then I like to place a little dot of super glue down in the screw barrel, but you do need to work quickly when you do that, but that will ensure that they don't unscrew later. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure I had the right screwdriver before I get going with these. And then in order to protect your lining of your bag, you can go ahead and take tape and stick over your screws. And you can place this off to the side. Moving on to our side panels, you'll need your pieces of E3, which are your elastic band tab exteriors. You're going to flip those to the wrong side. And there's two short edges on each piece. We're going to mark a 3/4 of an inch in. I went ahead and drew those lines, but you're just going to do a line across this way that's 3/4 of an inch in, and you'll do that on all your sides. I'm going to pull out your double-sided tape and place tape along those short edges. Now we're going to remove that tape backing and fold in to meet that line. And now we can stitch these short edges with a 1/8 seam allowance. fold in half a long way. So there's that. We get a nice long casing. Now you baste these together with a 1/8. Now you'll need your pieces of E1. Find the top center of both of them. Well, you can take the raw edge of your elastic casing tab and find the center of those. And that will get matched up with the center of the panel. Baste in place with a 1/8. Next, you'll place your linings of E2 right side down and match along the top edge, and you'll encase the elastic tab casing. I'm going to sew these top edges with a 1/4 seam allowance. And you can snip your seam allowance corners. This will help reduce bulk. And you can turn right side out. Okay, now you can top stitch along the top joined seams and baste around the perimeter, all with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now repeat on the other. Those are done. Well, not really done, but those are basted and ready for the next step. So you're gonna fold these back to make your pocket, and you're folding it back to the edge of the elastic casing. So it's just straight this and make sure that your line's straight there, and then you can press down and line up your fabric, and then that one, sure that that's a straight fold line. And we'll do the same on the other side. So again, folding at that casing, matching up that seam, that'll be the top, and then you can press down and that. And then you'll have something that looks like this. Prep my other one to get that ready. And folding over. Now we're going to top stitch down both of these panels on each side with a 1/8 seam allowance. I'll have these, or you have them be little seams like that. And we'll grab our pieces of E. And find the center point of the bottom panel part. And the center point of this. Make sure that your center points are aligned. And meet out this edge. So you'll make little pleat. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Matching up the side. And making the bottom have a little pleat. And I'm going to be ready for basting in a moment. I'm going to quickly attach my other one. And the pleats, which is essentially just pushing down that panel and making sure that it's flat and straight along the bottom edge. Okay. And we can baste these on with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now grab your elastic band and feed those through your casing. Going to attach this to each side. Repeat with your other. I'm just going to use my hemostats because these are longer than that other thing. Okay. And now we can base our elastics on with a 1/8 seam allowance. Those are really cute. Okay. Now we can do our side panel assembly. We'll need both of these along with our base. Align the bottom edges of our pockets that we just made with the short edges of the base, right sides together. And then sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. And repeat on the other side. Again, panel right side down, facing right sides together with your base. You want to grab your bottom part of your pocket. I'm sewing with a 3/8. Now trim your seam allowance corners. And we're going to press flat. You're going to press your seam towards your base. And then top stitch with a 1/8 seam allowance. And repeat on your other side. Again, pressing that seam towards your base. And top stitching with a 1/8. Now this finished panel should measure the same as our F2 lining. So if you want it, you can take your F2 lining and ensure that they are the same length. Now we can set this aside while proceeding on to the zipper gusset assembly. Now for our other part of our zipper gusset. Now start off with our grab handle. So you'll need your piece of G2. On the wrong side of it, we're going to draw a line along one long edge that is 3/4 of an inch high. So that would be all the way across that. And then on that same edge, cover that long edge with double-sided tape. And once you remove the backing and fold down that edge to meet that line. Now you'll take your piece of G3 stabilizer and align that centerly within the other edge of the grab handle. And then we're going to fold that edge down, and then fold our folded edge up. Now that fold won't be perfectly centered. Hold this in place with some clips. You can hold it in place with double-sided tape if you like. I just find clips more effective with holding it. And then your handle should measure 1 1/4 in height. Now, depending on the type of stabilizer that you used, that can affect the width of your, or the height of your grab handle a little bit. But the main important part is that you want to make sure that your fabric that you're overlapping, when you top stitch this edge, has enough to catch it. And it's not just holding on by the very edge of it. Now we're going to top stitch down this top folded seam with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now I personally like to take another row of stitches down my other side. There's your grab handle, and this little folded edge part will go under. Now you'll take your grab handle and your piece G, and you want to center your grab handle and then have a 3/8 of an inch overhang. Baste this side on first with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then we'll repeat on the other side. This side will be a little bit more trickier because the handle has the stabilizer in it. So we'll match up the center again, and then with an overhang of 3/8, and then tops, and then baste on with a 1/8 again. Okay, so there's my handle. And then you'll need your 2 pieces of G1. And if you're using a directional print, you want to make sure that the bottom of the directional print is here. So this would be as if you could read it. I'm going to place that right sides together with our panel, with our top of our gusset. And so with a 3/8 seam allowance. Trim our seam allowance corners, but leave that overhang of the handle. And just open your seam and top stitch with a 1/8. And we'll repeat on our other side. And match that edge, sew with a 3/8. And then trim our corners again. And then press out and top stitch. Now, if you want it to do rivets on your grab handle, you can place them right here, be 3/8 of an inch below the top stitching, and you would center them. Before you move on, you can ensure that your top gusset, your back portion of your zipper gusset, is the correct length by grabbing your piece of G4, ensuring that they are the same length before you continue on making your gusset. Place this off to the side real quick and grab my piece of GG1 with that right side up and your zipper ZG with your pulls. 2 pulls. If your person has a tendency of leaving off their pulls, then you can insert them now. I'm going to wait until I have my gusset assembled in order to put those on. I'm gonna cinch my zipper tape though. With your zipper right side up and your piece of lining of GG1 right side up, you're gonna baste this on with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then you'll take your piece of GG exterior and place that right side down and clip along the zipper edge. Now we can sew this with a 1/4 seam allowance. And then you can snip your seam allowance corners of your exterior fabric only, making sure to not cut into your zipper tape. We can start to turn out our fabric. Match up our fabrics and enclose your piece of GG2 stabilizer in between your layers or in between your fabrics. Now, depending on your fabric base that you used for your gusset, like if you used a vinyl, you might actually want to skip out on this stabilizer just because this is that opening, the main opening to your bag. And with most book bags, like, you really want to be able to open them so you can see, like, get into them and move around. So depending on how much structure you want and your base, this piece of stabilizer can be skipped. So I'm using a ripstop and a bonded twill. I am going to use that light sewn in 1mm padded foam. Now I can baste around this and top stitch with a 1/8 seam allowance. And now there's that part of the gusset. This will be the front part of it. Now we're going to attach our other side of our gusset, which will be the side that will have the handle. But before we get to the handle part, we're going to attach our gusset piece lining G4. And you'll attach it to the raw edge of the zipper tape and line it up so that the fabric is straight with where your fabric is already starting. I'll clip a few clips to keep this one from shifting, because we do want to make sure that this gusset starts and stops at the same placement as our previous gusset that we attached on the other side. Now I'll baste this on with a 1/8 seam allowance. And that was with your lining right side up, just in case I didn't say that. So your lining right side up and your zipper tape was right side up. Now keeping in mind that this will be your front gusset. So if you have prints and they're facing the way that you would read them, when you attach your handle part, make sure that that part is facing up. So this would be the print way that you would want it to face, and then turn it facing down so that they're right sides together. And clipping in and lining up where your start and stop of your fabric for your linings are. And then we can sew this on with a 1/4 seam allowance. Again, we are only going to snip off the corners of our exterior fabric. And don't cut into your zipper tape. So just like the other side of the gusset, we can turn our fabric right side out and press that seam before we insert our stabilizer if you're going to use one. It's kind of very fabric dependent. And this time we'll be inserting our stabilizer of G5. And now we're going to top stitch along our join seam and baste around the perimeter with the 1/8 seam allowance. There's your gusset. Now, if you did not slip on your pulls, you will need to do so now. There's that. And now the zipper gusset is ready for the side gusset assembly. So we'll take this piece with our piece of F2 lining. We'll have both of those right sides up. And I'm gonna connect at one of our short ends. And baste this on with a 1/8 seam allowance. And repeat for our other short edge. Just ensure that your pieces do not get twisted, as your F2 lining is going to be longer than your zipper gusset. And baste this side with the 1/8 seam allowance. Next, take your side panel with base and align it right sides together along the short edge. And then sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. You can trim your seam allowance corners. And then repeat on your other side of matching your side panel with your zipper gusset along the short edge. So my zipper gusset, and there's my side panel. And then sew again with that 3/8 seam allowance. and then snip the seam allowance corners. And I can turn this right side out. And you have one big loop. And before we put our clips our seams together of this, we're gonna insert our other piece of heavyweight stabilizer, which is our F3. I'm gonna put my seams together and clip around and joining my exterior to my lining. And this is just of the bottom section with the base and the side panels. And I'll flip around on the other side too. Okay, a little bit different of an angle since my phone died, but we have the one side clipped in around and our stabilizer in. I'm just gonna match up the other side and flip around just so things stay even as I'm sewing. I knew I was squeezing right in there. I have leftover fabric because instead of pulling out my gusset, I was pushing it in and matching the lining up at the wrong spot. She was going around and actually pulling out my bag so everything lines up like it should. Just shows you that position matters. And then I have that all clipped together. And go around. Okay. Now you can baste around the perimeter and top stitch along this join seam. is our zipper gusset fully completed. This will be as if you were looking at the front side of the bag. So once you baste around your perimeter and top stitch, we are going to attach our D-rings. You want to align these swivel hooks right above the elastic band on the front side of your panel. So here is your front. You want the lower, smaller gusset, the one without the grab handle. And you're going to face those in towards your fabric. Now you can baste those in place with a 1/8 seam allowance. Are those two? Now, if you aren't doing these swivel hooks, you would have skipped this step. Now your side gusset is now complete and can be placed off to the side for final assembly. Now moving on to the backpack straps. There's two different versions of the backpack strap. You can do the normal strap with or without the D-ring that come in the regular or the extended. And then you can do the backpack straps with the chest strap. I'm going to be doing the version without the chest strap or the D-rings, just because I spent time fussy cutting these straps and didn't think about it. And I don't want to cover up all the print. So there's are my pieces there. I'm going to take my two smaller pieces of webbing and my ladder buckles. I'm going to cinch the ends of my webbing. We're going to take our ladder buckle and you want to take it with the right side facing up. So the teeth on the bottom are the back side. This is the front side. And loop your webbing over this bar. And then fold your bottom piece back up and fold this top piece down to meet that. You want to have this top fold about 1/3 of the way across your webbing piece. So if you cut it like you've had it in thirds, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to clip this in place. And apply double-sided tape to the back, just in the upper portion in the middle, and repeat for my other webbing piece. And these are those, and these can be placed off to the side for now. And skip to step 45 of our straps, your exterior and your lining. And this is where you want to stick mirrored pieces together, and you have those right sides. And we're just going to clip around. And on that back arch, which is more straight than our inner arch, like this backpack strap curves this way. So on the outside of it, I'm going to leave about a 6-inch birthing gap. It helps, especially if you have stiffer fabric, to leave a nice healthy gap. not sew across the top edge. But also don't try to birth through this top edge either. You do want that nice healthy gap. All right, and clip the other. Again, leaving that gap now on this side since the curve is on the other side. Now we'll start from our slanted edge and sew around with a 1/4 seam allowance. And remember to stop at your birthing gap. I'm gonna make a little L stitch. And around your curve, it can be helpful to do a smaller stitch length. And then repeat on your other piece. Again, starting from that slanted side. Stop at your turning birthing point. Do an L stitch. Do another L stitch at the start of your point. And then you'll trim your seam allowance with pinking shears, or you can make notches. Pinking shears just work out easiest. You especially want to get it around the curve, making sure that you do not snip into any of your stitches. On your other piece, you will have 2 of those, and then we can turn these right side out. Learn out and turn out your other one. And now you grab your stabilizer pieces. I have H1. If you have the extended straps, then they would be H1. Insert your stabilizer and you'll get it nice and snug down into this bottom corner. And you fold in your 1/4 seam allowance. And then we'll top stitch around this perimeter with a 1/8 seam allowance. So there is that. If you would like, you can go ahead and do a second row of stitches 1/8 of an inch away from those previous stitching. I'm gonna set this off to the side real quick and do my other strap. And again, top stitch around with a 1/8 seam allowance. There's that strap. Take your straps and they will go with the curve outward. Not saying that that really matters for this step too much, but we're going to measure from the bottom up 2 inches. I'm also going to find the center of that too. And that will just help with centering the strap. Oh, eek. Okay. And then we'll pull back out our ladder buckles and remove the double-sided tape backing. So you'll remove the double-sided tape backing and we'll place the edge of that centered right at our marking. So that way that little piece hangs over. And then we're gonna sew a 1 1/4 inch box. I'm gonna measure down 1 3/8 because of the fact of the my seam allowance. So then I'll have that the 1/8 of an inch seam at the top. I marked my 2 lines of my stop and starting of my box. I'm gonna sew on this 1 1/4 inch box. I'm gonna start exactly at my marking and sew down to my other. As I get to that marking, I'm gonna pivot and sew along that line. I'm gonna sew back up. get to this line, I'm gonna start to sew diagonally down. And then I do have a separate video on just box stitching if you want to check out how to do box stitching even more of a close-up. Okay, stopping at that point. And I'm gonna stitch back over my previous bottom stitching. And then this time I'm gonna go up on a diagonal and stop at that corner. And then I'm going to sew across. There's that box stitching, and then I will repeat on my other piece. Now your straps are completed and they are now ready for your back panel assembly, so you can skip to step 55. Now moving on to our back panel, you need your 2 pieces of D6, your 2 pieces of seatbelt webbing that is 1 inch wide. And this length of this can be different per the wearer. Like if you have, if you are a bigger build, it does help to make these longer so you have more room to adjust. For my kids, I usually cut them a little bit smaller, so they're not as long, because then they'll just dangle. My kids also wear their backpacks pretty close to the backs, so. I'm gonna fold these in half with the long straight edge. So fold it in half along that edge. And then we're gonna mark 1/4 of an inch from that folded edge. And slide in our webbing. A 3/8 overhang. Okay, and you will want to position it above our marked line. So there's that one. This is our folded edge, marked up 1/4 of an inch. Then we stuck our webbing in with a 3/8 overhang. Now we're going to sew across this edge with a 1/4 seam allowance. And you're going to trim your seam allowance corners. And then turn your fabric right side out. And we're going to top stitch the entire perimeter with a 1/8 seam allowance. a second row of top stitching with a 1/4 seam allowance from this edge, and you're going to do it with the edge that has your webbing on it. And you'll have a piece that looks like that. And you'll repeat for your other one. There's that one. So you'll have your 2 straps. Set these aside for now. Now for the bag hook, if you are doing one, you'll need your piece of D5. Knowing that long edge, we'll draw a center line down the wrong side and then fold in to meet that center. And fold in half again to conceal that raw edge. And we can sew around the perimeter with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now your bag hook is done and we can set aside for now. Now moving on to our zipper pocket for the back panel, you need to take one of your pieces of D3 zipper pocket lining and transfer your zipper pocket marking from the pattern, or you can manually draw it on. I've already pre-draw on my pieces and this is on the wrong side of the lining. Then you'll take your piece of D, which is your back panel. I'm using that 3D air mesh. Make sure that your small arch is up at the top. And with this right side up and the pocket lining wrong side up. I'm gonna match our zipper panel 4 inches down from the top, or you can take the placement markings that are from the pattern piece. I'm going to use some tape to hold this panel in place. And we're going to sew across those 2 lines again to make the start of our zipper box. Now we can remove the tape if you have any that you were using to hold the piece in place, and then make our opening. And this is the same process as we did for the front panel. Again, I'm going to fold down those pieces so I can stitch them to the opening. Now you can push the pocket lining through. So there's my zipper box. Now you'll take your zipper ZD with its pull and singe the edge of your zipper tape. And slide on your pull. And take double-sided tape along both edges of your zipper. And then you can remove the backings to the double-sided tape. And I'll center that within the panel, which I start off, which I didn't show this earlier, I start off by matching the end of the zipper tape to the end of the panel and just keeping that this is in the center. That's how I start off lining up my box. And now we can sew around our box with a 1/8 seam allowance. One of the other things I didn't show before is that those stitches that we did when we tacked those panels down versus me flipping it right on out after sewing those two lines, those get covered by the zipper tape. So there's that part. Now we can add our other part of our lining. So we'll return to the wrong side of the panel. And you can trim your excess zipper tape. I'm gonna re-singe just my zipper tape since I cut it. Then take your other piece of D3 and place that right sides down so your linings are now right sides together. And we're gonna clip around just to hold the pocket in place. Now we're gonna sew around and close our pocket with a 3/8 seam allowance. Just remember to keep your main panel out of the way. Now there's that zipper pocket. And then you want to take your piece of D2 stabilizer and apply a piece of double-sided tape down the center. And then secure it in place to the back side of your exterior panel. Make sure that your zipper lining is flat. If you are not doing the luggage sleeve, you can skip over this step. You'll need your piece of webbing. We're gonna singe our ends. Now we can transfer your luggage sleeves placement marking from pattern piece D, or you can manually mark a line that's 7 1/8 inch away from the bottom edge of the backpack exterior. You have your markings. You're going to place the webbing under that marking and clip on the sides. Now we're going to sew box stitches along our 2 ends. And those boxes will be 1 1/4 inch big. So there's one, and then we'll do that on the other side. And there's that box. So then your luggage sleeve is now complete. Now there are two methods of creating the backpack straps and hook. You can either use the piece of D4, which I will be using in this make, or you can use a piece of 1.5 inch webbing. Just make sure that you take note on the proper placement and aligning. So I'm going to walk through this one. Here's a piece of D4, and we are going to turn this over on the wrong side real quick. So on the back side of your piece of D4, you will draw a line 3/4 of an inch away from the top edge. So if you had a directional print, it would be facing this way. So on that top edge of it, you'll draw that line 3/4 of an inch down, and then cover the edge with double-sided tape. And then remove that backing and fold up to meet that marking that we drew. And we'll take our pattern piece D, and you can either take the pattern placement from the pattern piece, or you can measure down manually 2 3/8 inch from the top edge. And you'll match the raw edge, so the non-folded edge, up to that line that you made. You're gonna sew this along on the side that has the raw edge, so not the folded edge, and you'll sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. It does help to draw on that seam allowance. You're gonna grab your made bag hook, which was your piece of D5, in half, and align it centerly. I'm gonna find the center of our bag real quick. And then when we center this, we're gonna have the ends that are about 3/8 of an inch apart. You'll have the bottom of your hook just slightly above that stitch line. And you can base these on. Now for your backpack straps, these strap placements can differ depending on the wearer. So for best fit, measure the backpack distance straps indicated by the red lines that are on the instructions, but it's the distance between the inner parts of your straps. For reference, most school age goers are between 1 5/8 to 2 3/8, and adults would be anywhere from 2 inches to 3 1/8 of an inch. So if you have your wearer around you, you can always base these on and kind of ask and see how they look over the shoulder. Now for your straps, you want to make sure that those are facing outward, so the curves are going out and not in. You don't want those to go in. So put them this way and then flip them up. As you see, those are facing out. And then align those slightly above that previous stitch line. And I made markings for where I needed those ends to stop so that it's easier to baste. And then I'm going to baste these on with a 1/8 seam allowance. That will make it easier for me than trying to reposition it. Okay, I'm gonna put that in on that. And as you can see, those are arcing outwards. Now you're gonna fold up that strap backing. You can hold it in place with clips, or you can do double-sided tape along that seam. And then you're going to sew around the perimeter with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then if you would like, you can sew another row of stitches down the middle. Or you can use rivets. And then as I sew, I'm gonna back tack across the start and stop of my backpack straps and my back handle for a little extra reinforcement. First, I'm going to do that perimeter stitching of a 1/8, and I like to do the top side first. And then if you would like, you can sew another row stitches down the center. You can place your rivets. Now to attach our strap connector tabs. I'll take those. Now you can take your pattern piece D of the back panel and transfer the markings for the strap connector tabs, or you can manually measure 1 3/8 inch up from the bottom edge. And we'll place the strap connectors just above that marking. And you want to have your webbing facing up and into your bag. And now we can baste these on with a 1/8 seam allowance. Those are both of those. You need to take your back panel lining of D1 and place that right side down so we can take our back panel and place that on top of it, encasing all of that. So you'll see the right side here and the right side there. I'm going to clip around with a fair amount of clips. This go around since I'm working with the 3D air mesh, and that has a tendency to like to shift. trim the excess of that backing. Based around with a 1/8 seam allowance. There's your back panel. I can set this aside for now. If you are not making the laptop compartment, you can skip to step 70. Right now is a good time to pause and treat yourself to a well-deserved break. For the laptop compartment, we're going to take our lining piece of DD1, that right side up, along with our zipper tape ZDD, along with our 1 to 2 pulls. I'm doing 2 pulls for it. So we're going to take our zipper tape first and singe our ends. And slide on our pulls. Now with your lining right side up and your zipper tape right side up, we're going to match our short edge and then baste with a 1/8 seam allowance. Repeat on the other side so you don't twist your lining. I like to just slide my lining one down. And then we'll baste this side also with a 1/8 seam allowance. And you can ensure that 1, you have your pulls on, and 2, that you make a loop that does not have any twist. Now for your remaining pattern piece, which is your piece of DD, I'm going to place that right side down on one of the ends of your zipper tape. And then sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. And you can trim your exterior fabric only. And then you'll repeat on the other side, again ensuring that your fabric does not get twisted. And then sew with a 3/8. And then trim your seam allowance corners to your exterior fabric. And you can turn that right side out. And we're going to top stitch along our joined seam with a 1/8 seam allowance and baste around our perimeter. And with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now our zipper gusset is completed and it's not twisted. And now that's ready for final assembly. Okay, now final assembly time. There are two different ways of finishing with the binding. You can do it the standard method, which is taking bias tape that's anywhere from 1/7, 1/8 to 1 inch, and you'll just fold it over your seam and stitch. Or you can do it the pre-attach method way, which is good if you struggle with doing binding. As you attach your binding, then it needs to be at least 1 1/8 inch wide of a binding. So you can't do this method with 1 inch. You'll go ahead and attach it to your gusset around first and sew, and then fold over. Now that does add bulk, so it can make it a little bit more bulky, but it is easier to sew and do binding if you have if you struggle with doing binding. Just make sure that your machine can handle the extra bulk. I'm going to do the standard method, but the pre-attach method is covered in step 76 and on. And the assembly order is the same no matter what method of binding you are doing. Now first you're going to start off with your zipper gusset, or the back of zipper gusset, so your laptop zipper gusset. And then your back panel. So if you were doing the simplified version that didn't have the laptop compartment, you would skip over doing this gusset, and you would attach this right to your main gusset, and you would turn this inside out, so this would be this way, and then you would attach this back panel towards your grab handle and put those right sides together, so it would look like that if you were doing just the simplified version. This panel may or may not have your sleeve pocket or even a slip pocket and zipper, depending on which way you want it to do your backpack. Since we are doing the laptop compartment, I'm going to take this with the back side right side up, and our zipper gusset for our laptop compartment. We're going to take our center point of our laptop, find our bottom center point. I'm going to make little notches into the bottom part, but the top I'm going to have to mark it. Now to find the center, top, and bottom of my panel. So now your laptop compartment, gusset right sides together with your exterior back panel. I'm gonna clip the bottom and work my way around to make sure that my zipper won't be twisted, and then match the center top of your zipper gusset to your panel. And it can help to unzip this panel to make, to unzip the zipper to make easing it around the panel easier. I'm going to clip around. And then ensure that your webbings are out of your way. And your strap and your extra zipper, all this you want to make sure it stays out of your sewing area. And we're going to baste around with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then hemostaps really help around the curve to help you hold your layers in place. And check to make sure that you caught all of your layers, and that for the most part you are happy with how your seams caught around the corners. And especially check up around your zipper tape. You want to make sure there's no gapping or puckers. Now time to do our binding. I'm going to start from this bottom edge. You can clip all the way around your binding first if you like, or you can work it on as you're sewing. Just going to grab a few little pieces to start me off, and then I'm going to sew it on as I go. And this time you're going to be sewing with a 1/4 seam allowance. And you'll leave a little extra so that you can fold over and hide that raw edge. Make sure that you caught all of your binding around your area. Now, there is that. Now we're going to turn this, and you're going to turn out your gusset a little bit so that we can do our next step. is you want to have your lining facing up. So you'll go ahead and take your piece with your back panel. That lining is going to be facing right side up. And we're going to take our panel with our sleeve pocket and have our sleeve pocket facing right side up, so that your linings that are for your laptop compartment are right sides together. I'm going to find the center of this panel. And that's your center point. And this time we're going to be clipping it to our other zipper. You want to match it to the wrong side of your zipper tape. So there's the wrong side of my zipper tape going against that panel. So that way that won't close in. Now I'm going to go ahead and clip around. Now we can baste around with a 1/8 seam allowance. And it's very helpful to sew with the lining facing up, so you can kind of curve around that. But do whatever way is more comfortable and easier for you and your machine. I'm gonna stuff my sleeve, my straps down into my pocket. Now it helps to sew with the panel lining facing up. And then you're going to baste around with a 1/8 seam allowance. Check out your laptop compartment. Zip. And there's your laptop compartment. I'm going to check around your curve real quick, especially down around the bottom gusset compartment, and then there. Right now we're going to attach this panel to our gusset. I'm going to turn your gusset right side out so your lining's on the outside, and then with your handle part facing, so this will be the back of your bag. Your handle facing closest to the panel. Actually, you want to unzip your laptop compartment to make it an ease of sewing. And again, I'm going to tuck my straps down into that compartment. So again, take your gusset with your handle side and place the back panel down into your gusset. So you'll have your lining facing right side up. And match the center of your panel to the center of the gusset at the top and the bottom. So you'll find your center points of your gusset at the top and the bottom of your zipper gusset. And do both sides of it before you start sewing, so that way on your other side it'll be easy to match that center / find that center. I'm going to go around and clip around and make sure that these parts go into that center, so that when you look from the other side of the gusset, you'll see your back panel. Here is what we have so far with it clipped around. So there's our interior and our exterior looking into our gusset. I'll flip up the laptop compartment so you can see it. And that's how it would look inside your bag. Now, I like sewing with the lining gusset, like the lining of my gusset, on my machine bed and sewing around in the circle. That will help catch your corners really nicely, and also maneuvering around the bag. Now, one helpful way of tackling this would be to sew your straight edges first and then come around and sew around your corners. I'm going to baste with a 1/8 seam allowance. Now you can go around and make sure that you caught all of those seams within your basting stitches. Okay, now once you've checked all of your seams, make sure that you're happy with your basting stitches. We can now attach our binding. And actually this time I'm going to go around and clip it on. I'm gonna leave a little tail / overhang. Now you can sew this with a 1/4 seam allowance. And then once you get to your end, you're gonna cover the raw edge under a little bit. Now you can go around and check that you've got both sides of your binding all the way around the bag, and then also you will turn out to check to make sure that we are happy with our gussets and curves. And once you've checked all of your curves, we are now good to move on to the next step. And if you haven't yet, right now is a very good time to definitely take a break, get a snack, some sugar. This last part is one of the more challenging parts just because there's so much to maneuver around your machine. I'm going to unzip our zipper gusset. Ensure that if you're doing the swivel hooks that those are attached. Webbing and everything is down inside your bag. Now I'm going to take your front panel and place that right side down into the bag so that you see your lining. Again, I'm going to match the bottom center and the top center, and then work our way around with clips. There's that. Again, we're gonna sew around again with our lining on our machine bed, basting with a 1/8 seam allowance. This is where it becomes the most challenging part of the pattern, because this is a firm stabilizer. So depending on your fabric and materials and your stabilizer and your machine, that can take into factors about how easy or challenging this can be. You can break up your basting into sections by doing the straightaways first and then going around with the curves. Hemostats will definitely be helpful within keeping the fabric together and working around your curves. We're going to baste with a 1/8 seam allowance. And it's better to go slow than to try to rush this. Now go around and make sure that you caught all your layers within your basting. Now, I'm gonna do the binding of the seam. And then after that, we will essentially be done, other than connecting our back pack strap adjuster thingies. Okay, this final sew around is going to be with a 1/4 seam allowance. And again, we'll leave a little extra overhang to fold back. In the home stretch of this binding. Now, go around and check your binding. Make sure you caught it on both sides. And then we'll turn out our bag and check our stitching. Now the moment of truth to turn it right side out. And then your scholar pack will be just about finished once we take out our straps and loop in these over the buckle and down through. And then we'll fold off these ends. I like to do it just a little bit and fold it back once more. And we'll do that to our other strap. And fold that down and back once more. And you can top stitch these with a 1/8 seam allowance. And now our scholar pack is finished. I hope you enjoyed making this bag as much as I did today. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Happy sewing, everyone. Thanks, bye. Now here is our finished scholar pack. I hope you enjoyed making this as much as I did today. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for sewing with me today. Happy sewing, everyone. Bye.